Hello and welcome to the channel. Today we're going to be checking out an amp that, unless you were either in the market for a Fender amp in the late 80s or 90s, or are just a massive Fender amp nerd, you probably won't have heard of before. So today we're going to be checking out the Fender Super 60, which was part of a line of amps often referred to as the red knob line, for the obvious reason that they have red control knobs. So as I alluded to at the start, this amp came out between 1988 and 1992. As a result of that, it's not particularly well documented, so online it's a bit of a mishmash of information, but I'll do my best to give you a bit of background on this amp before we get into some tones. So the Super 60 is a 60 watt all-valve 1x12 combo. It features two 12AX7s in the preamp, as well as a 12AT7 in the phase inverter position, and then two 6L6s in the power section. So fairly run-of-the-mill standard for Fender. What I've got here today and that you're hearing is the combo, although this amp did also come as a head. So this amp has two channels. One channel which is just clean and only has a volume control, and one channel which has a volume and a gain control, which is the overdrive channel. Both of these channels share a 3-band EQ, a presence control, a reverb, which is solid state unfortunately, but we'll get into that in a minute. This amp also has two inputs, a standard level and a slightly lower level. This amp also features an effects loop, an output for an extension speaker, as well as a DI out. But in my experience, the DI out doesn't really sound great. So for this video, you're hearing the amp mic'd up with the trusty old SM57. Now there's a lot of debate online about how good these things really are, but they have been used by various artists over the years, and so far my opinion of it is pretty good. Now I should say that from the factory the combos came with a 12-inch Eminence speaker in them. However, the one that I have here, my amp, has a G12 Marshall speaker in it that's been swapped out at some point by a previous owner. So when we get into tones, just take that with a pinch of salt and know that this amp isn't entirely standard, but I don't think it's too far from the original. Before we get into some tones though, I did also want to mention that this amp is surprisingly heavy for its size. It's a fairly average sort of size amp for a 112 combo, but the thing is getting on for nearly 25 kilos. I did almost injure myself trying to carry it back from the pawn shop I bought it in. On the subject of the shop I bought it in, I obviously got this one second hand, as these haven't been in production for about 30 years. But the reason I bought it, and the reason I wanted to make this video on it, is that they can be picked up surprisingly cheaply. This one that I have here I picked up for less than £300, which for a 60 watt valve amp is pretty good, I think. But that's enough talking, let's get into some tones, because that's what you're really here for. So today I'm playing my made in Japan 60s custom Fender Telecaster, and we're going straight into the amp. So we'll start off on the clean channel, and that sounds something like this. So that's the clean channel, which to my ear at least sounds a bit darker than you generally expect from a Fender. It's definitely still that Fender-esque ballpark, but yeah, to my ear it's a bit of a darker sound, and that seems to be a bit of a consensus online as well, that it's maybe slightly duller than you'd expect from a Fender with the sparkly cleans. I think it's still definitely a usable tone, but it is certainly darker. So moving on to the second channel with the gain between 1 and 2, sounds something like this. So that to me is more of a Fender-y clean, it's just a bit brighter and sparklier. Now I'm going to turn up the gain a bit. I find that really edge of breakup is sort of as far as I'd take this if I was using it for recording or anything. It's got a lot of gain in it, but it does start to get quite fizzy. So as is the case for a lot of Fender amps, really you wouldn't be using these for high gain. But turning the gain up to about 4 sounds like this. And now with the gain up at about 7 and switching to the bridge pickup, it sounds like this. So there you go, there's more of a high gain sound, which I think sounds pretty good, but it's probably a touch fizzy, although I guess you could EQ that out for a recording. I think this amp, like a lot of its cousins if you will, really it shines on the cleaner tones. Now another place where this amp shines like a lot of Fender amps do is as a pedal platform. So in front of me here I've got a Proco Rat as well as the Beatronics Tuner Fuzz. So I'll switch each of these on and we'll hear what it sounds like with a bit of distortion and fuzz in front of it. So we'll start with the Rat. So that was with the Rat, and now with a bit of fuzz. So as you can hear, you can get some great dirty tones out of it as well, but I'd be more inclined to do this with pedals rather than with the built-in gain. Now as I alluded to earlier in the video, my main disappointment with this amp was the reverb. It's by no means bad, but it's not great either. It's a solid state unit rather than having a spring in it. For the levels you've been hearing it at so far, it's fine. But when you turn it up a bit, you start to hear it's a bit artificial sounding and not the greatest. So I'll max it out and then you can hear what it sounds like. So as you can hear, it's not horrible sounding, but it's a bit artificial, and really you want to keep it at lower volumes. But there you go, so there's a brief look at the Fender Super 60 amp. I think despite it getting a bad rap online, I've been fairly impressed with it so far. And I think if you can find one of these for the sort of price I paid for it, it's a good little amp. Especially if you're looking for something a bit unusual or different, maybe to add to a collection of amps for recording or something like that, which is what I'm doing with it. Let me know your thoughts on it down in the comments below, and let me know whether you'd actually ever even heard of this amp. And as always, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.